Yeah. Yes, I saw. Good. We're live. So, welcome everybody to this meeting of Oxford City Council Cabinet on Wednesday, the 22nd of October at 6 p.m. in the Town Hall. We start with the apologies for absence. I'm not aware of any apologies other than from Anna Relton, who's going to be slightly late, but she is coming. Are there any declarations of interest? Not seeing any. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 13 to 26. Can we agree them as an accurate record? Anyone got any changes they need to make? No, good. Thank you very much. We now move on to addresses by members of the public, and I believe we have somebody here to address us. So, Marta, do you want to step up and place yourself in front of there? If you press the microphone, once the red button's on, you're on. So over to you.
Okay, sorry, just work this. Okay, is this on? Perfect. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I will try and be brief. I understand I only have 5 minutes. My name is Marta Lumza. I'm speaking tonight as a resident of Oxford and a former employee of the Oxford City Council with some 15 years of experience working in culture and heritage industry. I was the twinning officer in charge of signing the twinning agreement with Wrocław, Poland, and for 6 years after that, I worked as the community engagement and exhibitions officer at the Museum of Oxford. I also had a secondment act as deputy coordinator for a central Oxford response hub during the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020. I'm saying this to stress my experience in culture and heritage and in working with the residents of our city, as well as my knowledge of and care for this council. I'm here to present my serious concerns about the proposal regarding museum fees, item 9 on tonight's agenda, and to urge you to consider rejecting the proposal as it stands tonight. I will focus on only 4 main points as submitted in my draft, and I will illustrate each point with an example. Number 1, lack of community consultation. Appendix 4, section 3.17 admits there has been no community consultation on the proposed model. As I said in my draft, this poses serious reputational and relational risks to the council, as in the following example. One of the museum's key achievements is the strong partnerships it has built with incredibly diverse and often marginalized communities, from East Timor to Iraqi, from African families to LGBTQ+ groups and more. This has led to diversifying museum collections with objects generously donated or loaned by those communities. We now have a proposal which does not even list community partners on the concessions list, risking a situation where people will have to pay to see their own objects on display at the museum. This will have a negative impact on the relationships between the museum staff and the community partners. The lack of consultation will also affect the staff morale, and they'll have to communicate this to the people impacted by it. It might also affect your own customer service excellence assessment, which the museum has made valuable contributions to over the years. Finally, at a time when there are strong community reactions regarding the County Council's congestion charge, there's an increased risk this will add more arguments for those who think our local authorities simply ignore the opinions of their residents. Number 2, lack of evidence in the proposal. Except for the 2023 AIM report, from which it cherry-picks quotes to support its recommendations, the proposal cites almost no evidence or research to back up its claims, with spurious points based on conjecture, such as in this sentence, quote, "It is possible that the free entry may have had a negative impact on visitors' perception of the potential quality on the offer," end quote. A sentence so vague is practically meaningless, and yet it's used as the basis for an argument. This is just one example of many. It appears that you are being asked to vote on a draft of brainstormed ideas rather than research and evidence. Is this an example of best practice that I know this council prides itself on following? Number 3, my most serious concern is the poor quality of the attached equalities impact assessment, which is the Appendix 4. The assessment's own introduction says it needs to be based on, quote, "sufficient information and data," end quote, on impact mitigations and justifications. This assessment plainly does not do that. Instead, it contains generic text copied and pasted across all fields, both for the risk column and the proposed mitigations. As one example, this treatment leads to proposing that free access for people in receipt of state benefits is an adequate measure to mitigate the impact on asylum seekers. As we know, asylum seekers have no recourse to public funds. They can't claim state benefits. This lack of giving the specific impact on asylum seekers due consideration alone makes a dent in the council's recently confirmed status as a local authority of sanctuary. Certainly, lumping all people with protected characteristics together and treating them as a homogeneous whole with exactly the same needs is against the council's own ethos and recommended practice, and it poses a risk to its desire to be seen as a council which is passionate about equalities. both from personal experience as a resident who has several of the characteristics on this list and professional experience of working with many diverse communities in Oxford, I'm confident that when this is shared more widely, people will feel offended by this treatment, which again poses risks to the reputation of the council, its relationship with our city's most marginalised communities and with third sector agencies that work with these communities. My final point, number 4, is about not including a professional assessment, which was published in November 2024. This was called an Income Generation Options Review, and it was conducted by a reputable consultancy firm, Revels, and was published, as I believe, on commission from the City Council. The review used benchmarking, it used data from the museum, contextual evidence, and extensive research to make a set of recommendations, some of which go beyond this proposal and some of which contradict this proposal. As an example, it suggests that any gains from introducing a charging model would be offset by the reduction in footfall, and that a preferable option in order to actually increase income would be to invest in staff training. So the existing pay-as-you-can model is used to its full potential. In other words, if you want to help the museum's finances, this proposal is not the way to do it. In conclusion, I believe this is a wholly inadequate proposal, which includes little to no evidence, poor understanding of financial modelling, editorial errors, and simply bad maths. The numbers don't even add up. Most concerningly, it displays an attitude towards Oxford's residents that can only be described as contemptuous. The decision I believe you're facing tonight is accept this proposal as is, which may cause damage to both the finances and the reputation of the museum and potentially the whole City Council, as well as yourselves as individual councillors. Or you might want to work on it a bit more and actually try and make financially prudent decisions based on evidence and support work, which leads to more community cohesion, a sense of belonging and pride in our city for all. If it's the latter, kindly request to not vote this through tonight, seek more advice, consult with the museum staff on the ground and museum audiences, read the Revels report and make your decisions based on evidence and informed professional advice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to call on Councillor Hollingsworth to respond.
I understood there were 2 addresses and I'm responding to both.
Sorry, yes, I understand the second address is not going to be made, so it is only the first one that we will be taking tonight. Sorry, can you press your button off again? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wasn't aware of that. And some of my response relates directly to the one that's now not been given. Is it appearing in writing? I see a nod. It is appearing in writing, in which case I will respond to that as well. I would be perfectly happy to have item 9 on the agenda taken, since it is in my name in advance. So thank you for your address to the Cabinet on this report and to the one which is now in writing. And as I said, this is a response to both. The Museum of Oxford has been successful, very successful, at the work that it has done as a place where the culture and history of this city's people, not just its buildings, which is often what we're treated as possessing only, can be celebrated. And we should all be proud of how ordinary lives of ordinary people have been made central to the museum's work. And that work has been supported by the staff, the volunteers, the trust, and the many people who have contributed to those exhibitions. However, we must also not forget that the creation of the museum in its current format, I mean, obviously it goes back in different formats to 1975, but in its current format, was with an aspiration that it could eventually get close to being self-sustaining financially, and that has never been achieved. The council has agreed to spend £152,000 a year on subsidising the museum. But because costs have risen and hoped for sources of funding like the pay what you like approach, I think last year it was around £5,000 that raised, have fallen very far short of their objectives. And if you look at the last annual reports to council, financial reports, you can see that the actual cost of the museum in writing is close to £250,000 each year. And it is important to be aware that that doesn't actually take into account the potential revenue that part of the town hall could gain if it was being used in a more commercial way. So the actual figure is potentially rather larger than £250,000 a year. And this is therefore a very substantial sum of money, which the council could, and I say this to the full council, could choose to use on different things, on different services, or it could give that money as grants to community organisations, but it hasn't. What it has done is agreed to use it to support the museum. The important point here is that that support cannot be and is not without limits. So it would be nice to imagine that a museum that is free to enter and is subsidised by £250,000 a year as an option, as a result, is an option that is available, but it isn't. The choices we have in front of us, either today or another day if we look at it again, are two choices. The first of them is to do as set out in this report, introduce a small charge alongside a wide range of ways in which visitors, local or otherwise, can reduce it or not pay it at all, such as the 12 free days a year, and reduce the subsidy back down to the level that was agreed, the £152,000 a year. Or the other alternative would be to do something very different, close the museum. That's what 150, nearly, other local authorities over the last few decade or so have done to their local authority run museums. And that is because it is no longer possible to afford the subsidies to run them. And they have chosen instead to use the money saved on supporting local community groups that are equally in need of it. There are a great deal of places that attract visitors to our city from all over the world. The Museum of Oxford probably isn't one of those straight away, but that is not to deny that it has a really clear and attractive attraction from the stories that it tells, to bring those visitors who come to our city to come in, as well as local people, as customers. I think it's important to reflect on the fact that when charges were introduced some years ago for events in the museum, the same concerns were expressed then. Visitors would no longer come. And in fact, the evidence suggests the opposite is true. So, you know, we all have phones. We all know if we get a calendar invitation, it appears electronically, it sits in your phone app or whatever it is that you're using, and it equally costs you nothing to disregard it. You just ignore it. Whereas guests who are at an event or an activity which has been paid for, they're much more likely to come rather than just simply disregard it without cost to themselves. They have stayed longer in the museum, and based on the visual evidence, they appear to be likely to be better customers in the museum shop. And as the report goes on to set out, the Arts Council has generously granted the City Council a sum of £228,000 to spend on moving to a more financially sustainable approach to running the museum. They and other grant funding organisations have been quite clear. They have no interest in simply using their limited budgets to plug ongoing operational gaps in organisations not willing to do something to address those gaps. They instead want to work alongside forward-facing organisations like the Museum of Oxford in making sure that they are managed in a way that is financially sustainable for the long term. This is quite clearly a change in the way in which the museum will be run. And I am aware that change is challenging, not least when, while we have the evidence from the charges for events, there is no absolute certainty about what the outcomes of this new approach will be. The research and the evidence seems to point in a positive direction, I believe, but we will not know until it is actually tried. But what we do know, all of us, is that the current overspending of an already generous subsidy is not sustainable and it cannot continue. That's it.
Thanks very much, Alex. Right, we move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is council addresses on any items for decision on the cabinet agenda, and I'm not aware of any, nor are there any council addresses on neighbourhood issues, nor any items raised by cabinet members. So we now move to reports from the scrutiny committee. Councillor Alex Powell, I can see you online. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Hopefully I'm clear. I have a bit of a cold, so hopefully it's clear in the room. I'm sure you're all glad I'm not in the room, given I've just said I have a cold. But thank you very much. I'm going to give a brief update on the scrutiny meeting of the 14th of October, where we considered 3 substantive items, as well as a very brief update on the work of the Finance and Performance Working Group, which obviously reports into scrutiny. So that'll be the scrutiny meeting from October the 14th and the working group meeting from the 11th of September. The first item that the scrutiny committee considered was the approval and delegations for Westlands Drive and Halliday Hill Affordable Housing Scheme. So first, I'd like to express my thanks to Councillor Smith and to Dave Scholes for coming to the meeting and addressing the questions raised by members. Members of the committee asked particularly for some clarifications on low car development and car-free development, as well as some questions around the levels of car and bike parking provision included within the proposals. And there were finally further questions around the tender process and the timescales. There were no recommendations emanating from that item, so it was mainly just for the ability of the committee to raise questions. I should hand back at that stage and pick up the other items imminently.
Thanks. Do carry on, Alex.
Thank you very much. Moving on then to the antisocial behaviour policy. The committee would firstly like to commend the work being undertaken on this policy. We had a really long discussion, and I think there was general consensus from all of the members of the committee that we were sort of happy to see the level of work going into tackling antisocial behaviour in the city. Again, I'd like to express the committee's thanks to Councillor Arshad, to Richard Adams and to Simon Manton for their contributions. The key discussion elements centred around the way that communications between the council, partners and residents take place, and particularly there was a concern that there needed to be clarity, that complaints and reporting processes are easy to navigate, and that there is a clear line of accountability and responsibility where partners are involved in processes. There were also some questions raised about how we ensure accessibility and inclusion. So particularly a concern that we're ensuring that information around our antisocial behaviour, such as reporting and policy information, other guidance are accessible. And that includes obviously provision in multiple languages, as well as other access related issues. Particular discussion also came around fly tipping and environmental antisocial behaviour. We looked at, there was a suggestion there that data could be better integrated around, say, data from ODS and HMO licensing records to enable the identification of local hotspots and help us to inform targeted interventions. The committee raised views around the need to better understand the demographics and equalities impact of antisocial behaviour reporting and enforcement. There was a particular highlighting of the value in gathering and analysing data on protected characteristics of those subject to antisocial behaviour complaints, as well as an emphasis on the importance of prevention and early intervention. So particularly a focus around, how we can design public services and spaces to prevent antisocial behaviour, as well as consideration of how improving coordination between council services might help to reduce antisocial behaviour before it happens. Emanating from this discussion, there were 3 recommendations. The first of these was for officers to explore the feasibility of gathering and analysing data on protected characteristics of both individuals complained about through the Antisocial Behaviour Service and those making complaints through the Antisocial Behaviour Service. The committee recognised that some data may be limited in validity and that findings from the collected and analysed data and we recommended that findings from the collected and analysed data should be reported back to the committee at an appropriate time within the next 2 years. The second recommendation was that officers should set out within the policy the work the council is currently undertaking and plans to undertake in relation to the proactive prevention of antisocial behaviour, including actions such as working with youth groups, redesigning areas and improving coordination between services. And finally, the third recommendation was that there is a clear commitment within the antisocial behaviour policy to work collaboratively with registered providers in addressing antisocial behaviour, including requesting information from local registered providers on levels and types of antisocial behaviour reports received within their housing stock. There was a view that this information could then be used to identify patterns, overlaps and gaps between council and registered provider data, and reporting back on the efficiency of this partnership working and the health of relationships with registered providers as part of the council's wider multi-agency approach to antisocial behaviour management. That concluded our discussion on that item. Would you like me to allow Councillor Arshad to respond? There's a lot there.
Yes, thanks very much, Alex. I'll ask Councillor Arshad to respond. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I welcome the Scrutiny Committee's interest and engagement with this policy. And officers and I have attended the committee on 3 different occasions over the past year, giving us the opportunity to understand local councillors' views on how this policy can have an even greater impact on our citizens. And I've already accepted the recommendations put forward by the committee on both antisocial behaviour policy and the annual safeguarding report.
Thanks very much. I don't think Alex has spoken yet about the annual safeguarding report, but you can do so now.
Thank you very much. And thank you to Councillor Arshad and officers for the positive engagement on both items. It was very fruitful discussion in the committee. So yes, on the annual safeguarding report, which is the last substantive item from that scrutiny meeting, we again welcome the update on the council's safeguarding activities, and I would like to express our thanks to Laura Jones, in addition to Councillor Arshad and Richard, who were involved in the previous item. Key themes of the discussion was one of the central things was the need for greater use of comparative data to enable us to assess progress and identify trends in safeguarding. So as I'll come to, the one recommendation on this was basically that the provision of year-on-year data would enable us to more meaningfully utilise the reporting, looking at how we're doing as a council. There was also discussion of the council's multi-agency working arrangements, and we noted particularly the importance of strong coordination with both statutory and voluntary sector partners. There were some questions around how effectively the council can influence and oversee a broad network of agencies, and sort of concerns there around, given the number of agencies and the number of different zones of control there, how we could best exert influence and ensure that safeguarding is prioritised. There were also some concerns raised about cases being passed back between the city and county councils and whether effective feedback loops existed to avoid referrals being lost. And lastly, the committee sought assurances that safeguarding support remained effective for asylum seekers, refugees and migrants in the context of current pressures, particularly the protests that have taken place outside the hotel. So as I said, there was one recommendation, which was just that future safeguarding reports provide comparisons with previous years' data to allow monitoring of trends and assessment progress, particularly data in relation to modern slavery and exploitation, as well as severe weather emergency protocols. And where the data allows, that we'd like to see trend analysis so that previous statistics can be used for that year-on-year comparison, just to get that holistic view of how we're doing. I note from Councillor Arshad's response that was also accepted and responded to. So I might just proceed very quickly to talk very briefly about the working group summary as well. The working group met on the 11th of September. There were no recommendations at this stage, as we would expect, but they discussed 3 items, including the Outrun report, the quarter one monitoring report. Quite a lot of the discussion in the working group, understandably, was restricted due to the financial nature of it, and I think there's not a lot of detail I would go into at this time, but obviously we'll hear more from the working group in the lead up to the budget. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Very detailed report as always, Alex. So thank you very much for both your report and for the work of scrutiny, which we always very much welcome. And as you'll have heard, we actually accepted all your recommendations today. So thank you very much. As always, you're very welcome to stay or to leave as up to you, but you might want to go and nurse your cold elsewhere. So thank you very much. We now move on to item 9 on the agenda, and I imagine that some people, certainly Marta, will be here for this particular issue, which is the Museum of Oxford entry fee. I know that Paula and Helen are both here for it, so please do come and take a seat. And Alex, over to you to introduce the report.
Yeah. Sorry, just waiting for that technology functions. I will do a very brief introduction because you've heard quite a lengthy introduction to the principle already. Essentially what we have is a museum which is good at being a museum. It is well designed. It does very, very interesting things. It's been a success from that point of view. Where it is not quite hitting the success level is over meeting the amount of money which the council has agreed it would subsidise it, the £152,000 a year. So what we have, and this essentially the principle of this decision, as everyone knows, was actually taken 3 years ago. The principle is 3 years old. We're just actually not activated it. Is that we need to think more creatively and about how to make sure that that subsidy is not exceeded by the amount that is currently being exceeded by, which is a lot. And so what we have proposed is something which roughly a quarter of local authority run museums do, which is to have a charge of some sort. And if you look at the appendices and the detail, there are a significant number of reductions. There's a significant number of opportunities for free entry. I think it's quite important, and this is more of a comment on the constitution of the council and the process, that I want to make sure that the management team of the museum can adjust charges, that they can make things slightly different without having to come back through a cabinet paper in order to make a tiny adjustment in order to, you know, expand the number of free days from 12 to 15, or to add a category to those like the donors of things which are being exhibited. You know, those are the kinds of things which aren't really for a strategic level decision, which this should be. And I'm rather hoping that will be absorbed and taken into account in the decisions. But what we have is a detail of what is proposed. And Paula and Helen will take you through that and explain why we are where we're at. And I think what I would say as a final comment is, like any change, it comes with pressures. Change is never a terribly popular or easy option. So that is something that needs to be taken into account. And also, we're not 100% certain that this will work well. And if it does not, then we will have to go back and think again. But we could carry on as we have done with 3 years of thinking before actually implementing the decision we took 3 years ago, which was to introduce on principle this notion of charging, or we could actually do it and see whether it works as we think it will. And that, I hope, is something that we will reflect on in arriving at the decision. And that's enough for me.
Thanks very much, Alex. Helen, Paula, over to you.
Am I on? Yeah, okay. The Museum of Oxford reopened after a big redevelopment in 2021. I want to reiterate that the staff team are doing a fantastic job fantastic job on customer service. 88% of visitors are very likely to recommend people that to return. 4.6 out of 5 on TripAdvisor. The staff are doing a great job. However, over those 4 years, the visitor numbers that were predicted did not come. This is no one's fault. We've had a pandemic and we've had cost of living that at the time that the museum was redeveloped could not have been predicted. And therefore, we're in this position where we don't have as many people coming through the doors as was expected, spending the money that was predicted at the time because the picture changed. We've had 4 years. It's been acknowledged that there was a principle taken around charging. At that point, it was understood that that we would introduce that as a pay what you can model, which at the time was really popular and worked well across different cultural venues in the city. So we tried that pay what you can model, and with best will of the team, that did increase percentage-wise year on year, but it is from very small base, and it did reach about £5,000 last year. It's tracked to increase a little bit this year, but it's from a small base, and it's not meeting the required 77 grand that was the deficit last year. And so we needed to look at what we would do about that in terms of remodelling, and we looked at all sorts of different things. Do we introduce other attractions? Do we do additional work outside of the museum? And to be honest with you, the only opportunity that we could see that potentially had the ability to reach this level of money was to introduce a charge. We looked at different options. We looked at what other museums were doing. This is a national picture that had happened over the time, such that the Arts Council and the National Museum Directors Council and the Association of Independent Museums, the Museums Gallery Scotland, Welsh Government, all of the big key players in the museum sector created research themselves, admittedly at a national level, but involving a wide range of organisations, museums, including local authority museums, to look at what the impact of charging would be. And on the whole, well, the income always rose. The footfall quite often rose too. Sometimes it didn't. It depended on the context. But what they did see was a difference in terms of the income, and therefore we looked at what the opportunities were within the city. We've got 7 million visitors, quite unique. We have, because of the limited budget, we don't have a marketing budget. If you walk through the city, you don't see a Museum of Oxford all over the place. You go past the Ashmolean or anywhere else, you will see banners and plasters and everything else. And so we took the opportunity. Chair, may I ask, I understand that there's been a mention of part of the confidential appendix, which at the time of writing the report was a confidential element because of an embargo that has since been lifted. May I speak to that, as it's already been mentioned? This is the Arts Council money.
Ah, right. Yeah, if well, it has already been mentioned now. So.
It has.
Is that, yes. I mean,
So
it's
the
been
embargo,
mentioned.
just for those people who may be confused, because it wasn't originally in the pack. There was a confidential appendix that included element of this Arts Council money. So we're not alone. Local authority museums have been identified nationally by the national government as being under threat, to the extent that they put in significant amount of funding run through Arts Council programme for local authorities only that run museums to bid into. We have been successful in receiving a grant to help us to remodel how we run the museum for its longer term sustainability. That grant being 228,000, which includes a wide range of things that would be helpful, including money to help with the current deficit situation, including marketing, including support with fundraising and the like. And therefore, the charging model opportunity, along with this additional support from the grant, was by far and away the only option that we could take within the timescale that we needed to make that change, that had the chance of meeting the budgeted target. I'll pause there.
Thank you very much, Paula. And that was really helpful and detailed further explanation of how we've got to where we are. I'd like to reiterate your remarks about the amazing work of the staff and volunteers and indeed trustees in the museum. It's a fantastic museum and I thoroughly encourage everyone to go and visit it. I think, you know, I'm confident personally that the proposals in this paper are really the only way forward at the moment. But I would like to open it up to questions and comments from Cabinet, and I can see a number. So Joey and then Ed.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Paula. I've got a comment and 3 questions. So the comment, the report provides a well-considered and balanced approach to introducing charging model for Museum of Oxford. It demonstrates a genuine effort to preserve accessibility while generating essential income. However, greater clarity on visitor data, repeat visits, and administrative implication would enhance confidence in the projected figures and the model's overall sustainability. Questions. How were the 50% footfall estimates derived, and do we have any benchmarking data to validate these assumptions? What systems will track and manage concessions eligibility, especially for free and discounted categories, without creating operations strain? Has any sensitive data analysis been done to model different footfall or repeat visit scenarios and their impact on income stability? Thank you.
Can I?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm going to do an initial, and then the 3 detailed questions I will leave to Paula to answer. The broad one is that yes, we do have limited data. One of the reasons we have limited data is we haven't implemented a charging scheme. The risk we would have if we did not implement a charging scheme is we would continue to not have data. And so we would be in a circle and never moving forward. And so, yes, as I said, these projections, they are projections. They're well-informed projections, but one can never tell. It's much like the county council are about to discover with congestion charging. They've got a projection model. Let's see what actually happens. It may be slightly different. We don't know, nor do they, and they would accept that. And this is the same. We don't know with absolute certainty. However, we have done a considerable amount of work to estimate that this is the best way forward. And so with that, I shall go over to Paula.
Paula.
Yes, so reiterating what Councillor Hollingsworth has said around data, it will help us to have data by having a charging model. Where we were looking for evidence, it is in what we're calling the AIM report, which is evidence in the Cabinet report, as that looked at local authority run museums across the board, and information from the Arts Council as well, which is what led in the first place to this grant being available in order to help remodelling things. The grant itself will be paying for the ticketing system. We haven't had the money or the budget to pay for a ticketing system before. In terms of the monitoring, the reports from the ticketing system will be monitored very closely. And also that will go through and be tracked by senior management through our change board process as well. And in terms of the diversity element, which I have to say, the team are incredibly passionate about. The whole point of this museum is to tell the diverse stories of the people of Oxford who may not otherwise be heard. And so from a diversity point of view, again, the data and the analysis working with our BIU unit will help us to identify, are the people in our community who are not coming to the museum? How do we make sure that we're engaging them? How do we make sure their stories are told? Because if we don't have the data, it may look like we're being accessible by saying it's a free-for-all, come along. But actually, is that really equitable? Might be equal, but is it equitable? In order to be equitable, we need to have more information. This ticketing system, this way of working, will enable us to do that. It will also enable us to do our mission of making sure that we are reaching those very people that we want to work closely alongside. And I have to say, from the charging point of view, we do have, and I want to emphasize this, that we have volunteers not only being free, but being able to have a +1. I think it may have been assumed by some people that volunteers are people who welcome our guests to the museum, but there are many more volunteers in the museum, including our wonderful community groups who work and give us many, many hours of their time through projects to bring to life more stories and more artifacts from our diverse communities. And they too are volunteers, and they too will fall within the free +1 arrangements.
Thank you very much, Paula. Really a helpful and detailed response. Just on the whole issue of the confidential information, I was just checking with the Chief Executive on this because I was trying to get my head around exactly what happened. But my understanding is at the point that the report was published, the information was embargoed, but it is now
Correct.
It is now not embargoed, it is in the
Correct.
public domain. So just to explain to everyone why we have had this slightly odd situation where we were talking about something that was originally confidential but is not now. And I presume that we'll be able to release that information in some way in terms of the reports that are attached to this agenda. But I'm not quite sure how that will work. I'm sure someone else will sort it out. I hope so. Yes, the minutes would be an excellent way of doing it. Good idea, Chief Executive. That's why we pay you. Thank you very much. Councillor Turner.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, so grateful for the presentations we've heard tonight on all sides, and also for a number of emails. And if people did email me about this, I haven't acknowledged it. Be assured I did read your messages, and I understand, and I really understand the strength of feeling on this. It clearly, heritage is something which I think speaks to something all of us in different ways care about. A number of people then really go the extra mile, either they work in a museum or they're a volunteer in a museum, or they've made the place their own. The museum also has I think a very stirring history amongst, around as well, a council officer who passed away some years ago, who was a real champion of it, and it's a very special space. And this is not, I think, where we want to be. And I just want to acknowledge that. Equally, we're in a position where budgets are incredibly tight, and the thing which I always explain to people, and colleagues forgive me for just mentioning this again, as a council there's some things you have to do. You have to do the planning, you have to do the bins, you have significant, in our case, very significant obligations towards people who become homeless, quite rightly. You have those obligations, but the costs of that have been increasing as the housing crisis gets worse. And then you've got other things which you want to do, if you like, discretionary services. And often those are the things that we really, really care about. And this is one of the things that we care about. The problem is, of course, you can't cut back on the stuff you've got to do. You've got to do it, which means when your finances get terribly squeezed by less government funding or new pressures or growing pressures or inflation or whatever it might be, energy costs, or the double-digit millions that were wiped out during the COVID pandemic, all of those things, then it's the discretionary things that come under pressure. And you particularly don't like any change there because those are the things you care about. And whether it's support for advice agencies, whether it's about support for community centres, whether it's about the Youth Ambition Team, whether it's about the museum, these are things that we continue to want to invest in because we care about them. I did also go through, because I wanted to check, I'd be concerned if anyone tried to turn this into a party political football. I went through the records of all of the budget amendments submitted for last years, and I didn't see anything about the museum. So I don't think anyone has been saying actually, they wanted to, I don't know, reduce the grants budget in order to increase the funding for the museum. That's not something. So I think this is where councillors have been coming from the same place. But all of that being said, it really is unwelcome. I got three questions. The first two might well be for Paula actually, and the third one might be for Alex. But just a question. So the first one was in Marta's comments earlier. She mentioned specifically people that had no recourse to public funds, who of course then by definition aren't in receipt of benefits. So I wonder if there was any reaction to that. I mean, clearly people that have no money at all, but live in Oxford, couldn't have means to pay. So I wonder if there was a reflection on that, or if that's a takeaway. The second one, which has been put to me by a local group, is that where you've got groups of young people who might have been, or I suppose they might not just be young people, so hold that thought, they might have contributed something to a temporary exhibition. So it might, for example, be film or photos from a holiday activity. They want to go and look at it. I think broadly speaking, when we're talking about school groups from Oxfordshire, we're probably talking also about youth groups that are associated with a project who've got something there. I'd be surprised if we said, for example, a Youth Ambition holiday play scheme wouldn't have the same discount or rather the same concession as a school group from Oxfordshire. But I think that's an area where if you had reflections on whether that could see a bit of flexibility, I think that'd be helpful. But equally, maybe not. I mean, we could all come up with a list of exemptions that we want to see. And the third one was just on the time scale. I mean, I think Alex, you talked about, and I think Susan, as well, in your introduction, you talked about how we're going into uncharted territory with this. I mean, just so people have a sense of it, what's your feeling about how long you'll need to get a sense of how this is working, given that things like marketing would take a bit of time to kick in?
Lots of good things to cover there. And let me just add that I think Alex said in his introduction, Paula, that we might want to be very clear that we don't want to have every last change of any concessions coming back to Cabinet, because that's not going to help anyone. So do we think that the current recommendation to Cabinet is sufficient to cover some minor changes, or do we need to be slightly more explicit about that? And what is currently covered by it? So over to Helen, by the looks of things.
So do you want me to take that? Just in the report, the fifth recommendation gives the delegation for the implementation of charging to myself. So that might be an opportunity to pick up some of those issues where we could fine tune the scheme if members felt that was.
I think that'd be helpful. I mean, I think there's a general understanding around the table that, we are absolutely open to the idea of the concessions being looked at in more detail and making sure that they're right. And I think this example that Marta used of a group, and which I think Ed also referred to, of a group who's contributed to the exhibition, we'd want to obviously make sure that they had an opportunity to come and look at their exhibition for free. So it's that sort of thing, trying to make sure that those groups are being taken into account. And then there was a very specific question about those without recourse to public funds.
Yes, so as I say, we have considered this in great detail, including those without recourse to public funds. We have excellent officers that we work very closely with across the council to look at these. And therefore they are covered both under the volunteer element, where there's been voluntary hours around contributing to the museum, but also under the activities. So people that are involved in coming in to the museum for activities also have the opportunity within the within reasonable framework to be able to come into. So we have kind of tucked those options within options that are already in the report.
Thank you, Paula, and I think it's over to you, Alex, for the last bit.
I get the last bit. Yes, it's an interesting question to which the answer is quite difficult. I am very conscious, of course, that the council sets its budget every year. So were this to be unsuccessful and the overspend go the wrong way, and so instead of a subsidy of £152,000 a year, by the end of this year, it's 250,000 or 350,000. That potentially might warrant a rethink fairly early. If, on the other hand, the scheme has only just begun, which it will have done by the time we get to the budgetary process. I mean, we could be days into it, frankly, because it will take that long to get the ticketing machines set up and such like. I would say that one wants to see at least one normal year with the marketing opportunities that come with the Arts Council funding. Looking at the currently confidential appendix, 95% of which can be made unconfidential now, but there is 5% in a couple of paragraphs, which I will talk to in an abstract term, that they suggest various potential ways of forming partnerships, and it will remain confidential depending on how those partnerships go. But those are going to take a period of 12 months, I think, to test as to whether they will be successful in driving the visitor numbers up or not as successful as hoped. So I would have said at least 12 months, unless there is an acute problem, in which case the acute problem needs to be dealt with quickly, and preferably 24 or even 36 months. And frankly, we all know that in 36 months' time, this council will probably cease to have existed and it will be replaced by something else. We don't know what the something is. So that seems to me a sensible thing to be aiming at, a review, so that whoever the successor body that takes over this museum has some clear information about what is working, what is not, what has been successful, what could be better, all of those kinds of things to be put in front of it. And it's always worth reflecting back that if you go back to 1975 and the creation of the original museum, it was originally going to be created by what was then Oxford's City Council, the Council for Oxford. Local government reorganisation then changed that. So the building was the town hall. The original people who ran the museum was the new Oxfordshire County Council. So these things happened 50 years ago. So I guess we're going full circle.
I'm afraid you're not. No, sorry. Right. Oh, sorry. I saw Councillor Nigel Chapman.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a question, a comment, and then a sort of general view about it all. The question was about the Arts Council grant, which we can now talk about. Often when you apply for Arts Council grants, you have to sort of show willing yourself to provide some sort of funding to help the situation. Was that the situation here? How far was the fact that we were going to raise some extra revenue ourselves, in your professional view, helped us win that grant? That's my question. Then I'll come on to comment.
So first of all, we didn't have to provide any match funding at all, which is unusual. And I think it's worthwhile pointing out part of that grant, up to £77,000, however much is needed, will pay the contribution of any deficit position on the budget this year. That is so rare and very, very welcomed. But, you know, the Arts Council has a lot of evidence of new ways of working with some things working well, some things not working so well. And what we did have to do is have a plan. So what they weren't going to do is just give money to fill a gap for a year and keep us going for a year, limping on with that level of funding. They wanted us to apply with a plan, and that's what we did. And we were successful for every penny that we asked for, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, no, that's is reassuring. That's kind of what I expected you to say. So therefore, the corollary of that is that if you don't have a plan which has charges in it, which gives some financial stability, you put at risk the Arts Council funding, which in terms of scale, I don't want to just all the figures, but is way more money, let's put it like that, than the funds coming in from the charging in a given year. So in terms of jeopardy, it would be pretty difficult, frankly, to reverse a charging policy, however modest it is. That's the first observation I make. Second observation I make is just in terms of communications. I didn't understand the phrase state benefits when I walked into the room in relation to people over the age of 65 or 6 people in receipt of the old age pension. Mm-hmm. Often that phrase is used for people on pension credit, things of that kind. So I think in terms of communication, I think you'll need to clarify that it's not just people who are receiving benefits in inverted commas, but also people who are receiving a pension over the age of 66, it depends what year they got it, to make that really clear that they will not be paying anything here, okay? And the third thing I'd say is that, I like the inventiveness of trying to look for partners. I think to sort of catch the slipstream of other operators in the city seems to be really, really a good idea. And I hope that works. And therefore, when you see it in the round, this is my sort of comment now, it's a fair balance being struck here. You can go to one extreme and say, never charge over my dead body, on a kind of matter of principle. You can charge a lot more than this. A lot of museums in the city can and do, and in this part of the country. So this is a modest payment to give stability. And therefore, I think it's a well-judged proposal. I think you've sort of hit the sweet spot here and should be commended for. I think it's a lot of work, and that's why I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Nigel. Linda.
Yeah, just to pick up on what Councillor Chapman said about state benefits, I think we will need to be quite sort of explicit about what we actually mean with that, and you might want to draw on the work that the leisure services team did on this, where we saw that if you just open it up to everybody that's on universal credit, that includes people on fairly high household incomes, because it includes like top-ups for childcare and other elements of income which people receive, even if their income is relatively high. So I remember when we were looking at it from a leisure point of view, we just included people who were receipt of the housing element of universal credit. That seemed quite a targeted way to focus that support. But I'm sure you'll bear that in mind. But I think, there's still some work to do on that to make it clear and fair
and consistent across our services, which I think is also important. Okay, I think we've had a good debate and some very good questions. So I'm going to move us to the recommendations. I'm going to propose a very, very small amendment to the recommendations, which is just on that final one, which is to delegate the implementation of charging, I'm going to say, and any minor changes to the Director of Citizens and Community Services, just to cover ourselves in case you wish to make any minor changes to the charging or concessions that are in front of us at the moment. So with that minor change to the recommendations, are people happy to accept the recommendations in the report? Thank you very much. That is unanimous. So thank you. We will now move on to agenda item 10, which is the antisocial behaviour policy. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Helen and Paula. We now have Richard online, and Councillor Arshad, over to you.
Thank you very much. Cabinet, I'm really looking for your support tonight to approve this antisocial behaviour policy 2026 to 2029. We all know that Oxford City Council is committed to tackling all forms of antisocial behaviour. Its responsibilities are integral to its role and its housing provider, environmental champion and responsible authority for the Oxford Community Safety Partnership. This policy fulfills that council's duty under Section 218A and Housing Act 1996. as amended by the Antisocial Behaviour Act 2003, requiring local authority housing providers to formulate and publish antisocial behaviour policies and procedures. The Social Housing Regulation Act 2023 Neighbourhood and Community Standards require the council to work with local partners to help tenants live in a safe, clean and well-maintained neighbourhood and make sure they feel secure in their home. This antisocial behaviour policy and the council's antisocial behaviour procedures are part of our commitment to delivering these standards. Oxford City Council's existing antisocial behaviour policy is reviewed every 3 years, and the current policy expires in December 2025. This policy sets out the council's responsibilities as a landlord, environmental protection champion, and lead member of Community Safety Partnership. It sets out the council's view of what is and what is not antisocial behaviour and sets service standards depending upon the nature of the case. Anonymous cases that have no complainant details will not be investigated. The policy describes the 5 core principles that underpin the council's commitment to tackling antisocial behaviour and the activities that support these principles. These are principle number 1, no one should have to suffer from antisocial behaviour. Principle 2, reports of antisocial behaviour will be treated seriously and dealt with professionally. Principle 3 is antisocial behaviour will be addressed firmly, fairly and proportionately. Principle 4, we will work with our partners in order to deliver an effective antisocial behaviour service for our communities. And principle 5, we will deliver high quality customer service. This policy includes a reference to Oxford City Council's compliments, complaints and comments process for customers who wish to provide feedback on the service they have received. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lubna. Richard, would you like to say anything about the policy?
I think Lubna's probably covered it in her introduction. I just want to thank the Scrutiny Committee and Councillor Powell for the scrutiny's engagement, which began back in March this year, and it's been we've been there a number of times. It's been a really helpful process, and also our tenants. We've had a dedicated tenant panel that we've met on a number of occasions that fed their views back on the policy. And we've made the necessary adjustments. I think there has been a lot of feedback. It's more about policy implementation and how we communicate and make our services even more accessible. So yeah, just want to recognise their feedback and contribution.
Thanks very much, Richard. Right, over to questions and comments. I'm not seeing any, so well, I've got one anyway. So it was actually very specifically on the Scrutiny Committee recommendation that we accepted, which was about the connection into registered providers and social behaviour in there. Because funnily enough, I was thinking about that very issue myself over the weekend when, or no, it's last week anyway. Matter. But I was wondering how we connected in with registered providers on this, because I mean, obviously quite often tenants are moving potentially between our tenanted properties and other registered providers. So from that perspective, obviously there are some interests for us as a council, but in terms of us as a council representing residents across all of our communities, anything we can do to assist registered providers is helpful, as well as just sharing the information. So I was just wondering if you could outline a little bit about how we do work together. That would be really helpful. Sorry, I think I'm probably addressing that one to Richard, Lubna, unless you wanted me to hand that one to you.
Yes, please. If Richard, you can kindly answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is, in fact, that was a topic raised at Scrutiny a lot in terms of our mixed tenure estates and how we deal with the kind of the neighbourhood consumer standards around public spaces, shared environments. I think on a case-by-case basis, we're pretty good at this, and we work with the police and local neighbour teams and RPs on individual cases. But I think In fact, I was only talking to Neris today about how we join up at a more strategic level around neighbourhood related issues. I chair the Community Safety Partnership. We have some representation and we are trying to expand that, recognising that RPs quite often have a member of staff dedicated to quite a wide regional area, and so it can be slightly tricky. But yes, that is definitely an area that we are actively exploring at that more strategic level. Case level, I think we're okay. But yeah, more can be done around that kind of external public space planning and join up.
Thank you very much. Very helpful. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay. Well, in which case, can we approve the antisocial behaviour policy and delegate authority to the Community Safety Service Manager to publish it and make any amendments as required? Well, you're all ahead of me. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Richard, for that. We actually have, do we have... sorry, next item on the agenda, therefore, is the draft air quality action plan. So, thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much, Chair. So yes, this action plan exists because Oxford falls under an air quality management area due to current and historic levels of nitrous oxide pollution in the city. This means that this report is a statutory document which must be written and revised every sort of 4 or 5 years. I think the last one was a bit screwed over by COVID, with the current one running 2021 to 2025. The UK legal limit for nitrous oxide in areas of public exposure is 40 micrograms per cubic metre. The current action plan did the very Oxford thing of having a lower limit than the UK legal one, aiming to achieve 30 micrograms per cubic metre across the city by 2025, a target I'm very pleased to say we've effectively achieved. This new plan builds on this progress and aims for 20 by 30 or 20 micrograms per cubic metre by 2030. This lines up with the new World Health Organization's interim target for air quality and aligns in both pollution level and timescale with the EU's recently adopted legal standard in this area. This document also lays out a range of actions, action plan, that can be done to achieve that goal. Some of these things the City Council controls, most are not. I should also emphasise that many of the elements of the schemes described in this plan are very much still subject to political approval and public consultation, meaning that their design and scope may evolve in the future. Finally, I will note that the recommendation here is to approve the plan for public consultation and not approval full stop. We will hopefully see this report again in the new year following this consultation. And finally, I would just like to give my very great thanks to Pedro, who is on the call, for the huge amount of work he put into what is a very good plan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I didn't introduce you properly, Pedro. So, but please introduce yourself and say anything you would like to add to that introduction.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Councillor Anna Relton, for the very kind words. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate a little bit of what Councillor Anna said. So we believe that this draft air quality action plan, including the commitment to pursue this new local air pollution target for the city, reaffirms a bit the city's continuous dedication to go above and beyond in terms of trying to deliver cleaner air and healthier lives for all those who live, work and visit Oxford's. I think I don't have any more to add to what was already said by Councillor Anna. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Has anyone got any questions or comments? Nigel.
I think we should let the item pass by without some comment of congratulation, frankly, about the achievements. So very well done. And not just the NO2 levels, but also the levels of particulates, which are in this debate are becoming more prominent, I would say. And people don't often talk about those, but they can damage people's health significantly. And we're already compliant with the UK legal limits in that area, well ahead of, getting on for 15 years ahead of where the UK might be nationally, which is an amazing achievement. So I just think it's a really well written, can I say to the author, is it Clive Triton or is it Pedro? Extremely well crafted and written report, very clear, which for a non-scientist like me, I found very, very readable and accessible. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, is that you, Nigel? Not other Nigel. I have noticed during the course of this meeting a number of phones and computers giving notifications. If people could please switch notifications off on both their phones and their computers, that would be very welcome because it is quite irritating. Thank you very much, Pedro. I think we've had a number of comments, but I can see we've got another question or comment coming up. Alex.
Well, I'm inspired by Councillor Chapman's desire that there should be more comments, and I thought it's a question to some extent. Be interesting to hear Councillor Relton or indeed Pedro's responses on this. The issue about particulates often gets underplayed in looking at the impact of increasingly heavy private cars. Anyone who looks as they walk or cycle or drive or travel on a bus will know that there are an increasing size of vehicles, and particularly electric vehicles. Certainly the leader of the council will be able to tell you how many times a very large four-wheel drive vehicle has driven down Market Street looking for Christchurch normally, or some other, possibly one of the Wizard shops, who knows, the vehicle having been hired some 2 hours previously at Heathrow Airport. But this is a serious issue, and I'd be interested to know what your reflections are, the impact this is likely to have as things like the anti-pollution charges and things like that, the restrictions that are in place don't apply to vehicles which happen to be electric, but which are very heavy and which have the potential to produce what are extremely dangerous levels of particulate pollution. What do you think should be the approach to handle this?
Well, that was a nice final question.
Thanks,
Anna,
Alex.
do you want to take that
That's
one,
great.
or shall I?
So, I mean, yes, there is a sort of great irony in that a lot of the sort of drive towards electric vehicles and the sort of pollution benefits from the tailpipe emissions of those going away are largely being undone by the fact that cars, not just electric vehicles, but all cars are getting steadily bigger and bigger. This means essentially more tyre wear and more brake wear. And these particulates essentially do end up in our lungs and embedded in our brains and all sorts of other fairly awful things. So I think there are some cities in the UK that have started sort of looking around different levels of parking charges based on size or weight, and can't remember if this is in this action plan or not, but this action plan is only for nitrous oxide. It is not for particulates. I think this is basically because this is a statutory document which is about nitrous oxide, but there are sort of policy interventions which people are starting to try in this area, not least also because these cars are starting to not fit into car parking spaces either. But it is a little bit outside the scope of this particular action plan.
I think it has already been referenced once on today's agenda, but obviously we are moving ever closer to a time when this council will be replaced with a unitary authority, at which point we would have both sides of this action plan to kind of assess, I guess, and to deliver. At the moment, it is something that's somewhat divided between the two authorities, the Transport Authority, who have some of the responsibilities here, and us, who have the responsibilities for monitoring and the air quality. Pedro, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes. So I completely understand the point that was raised, and yes, it is true that the biggest percentage of emissions from PM 2.5 that now come from the transport sector relate with the fact that electric vehicles tend to be heavier, and therefore there's more potential for tire wear and for road resuspension and all of that. But I think it's important for me to bring a stat that comes from our source apportionment study, and which is included in this air quality action plan, which is that the transport sector only contributes to 15% of the total amount of PM 2.5 that are emitted in the city. So that perhaps helps putting a little bit things in perspective. The biggest sector that actually contributes to PM 2.5 emissions is the domestic sector, is the burn of solid fuel, the use of wood burners and all of that. So yeah, in comparison with transports, unlikely to what people might think, yeah, transport is not, to these days, the biggest contributor to this type of pollutant.
Which is quite extraordinary considering the relative numbers of the two things. So yeah, thank you. Right, unless anyone's got any further questions or comments, Lubna.
I'd like to ask the cabinet member if she has any messaging to give out now that Halloween's approaching and winter's coming upon us. Is there any messaging that you'd like to give to the city?
Wow.
Great question. I'm not sure really. I mean, I think it is better to heat your home with either a heat pump or a gas boiler rather than a wood burning stove. If you value indoor air pollution, I think maybe it's that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Right, thank you for that. We are, as Anna rightly said at the beginning, approving this to go out for public consultation, so it's not a final approval of the plan. And so I would obviously urge people to share their views as part of that consultation. Everyone happy to approve to send out to public consultation? Yep. Thank you very much. And thank you very much again, Pedro, for a really good report. So we shall look forward to seeing it again following the consultation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, item 12 is HRA policies, and we have Councillor Linda Smith to present it, and we have James, who's here in the room, is going to come as well, and Eris. And then we also have Mark and Stuart, I think, online. So I hand over to you, Linda.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I'll let our very able officers take you through the policies, but just to say, I mean, these are 4 really important policies we've got on the agenda tonight that I hope we'll approve, that are an important step towards making sure we're fulfilling our obligations under the Social Housing Act, but more importantly, set out to our tenants exactly what they can expect from us to help hold us to account and make sure we're delivering the high standard of services which our tenants should be able to expect from us. I'm also really pleased that all of these policies have been given a good going over by tenants. We've started to use the new tenant engagement mechanisms which we're developing and about to launch. And their input is there in these policies, and I'm really pleased to see that.
Thanks very much, Linda. Eris, officers, so James, Mark, Stuart, I don't know what order to take you all in. Would any of you like to add anything?
Shall I just briefly add? I won't go through all of the policies, but just to bring particular attention to the damp and mould policy. As we are preparing, obviously, for the launch of our law on the 27th of October. So it's just to give assurance to Cabinet, obviously, that policy, that the bringing forward of that policy is absolutely in line with the launch of our law and the stringent new expectations of us as a landlord to be responding promptly to any hazards that are coming to our attention via tenants. So that is set out in the policy. And then just for assurance, sitting behind that policy is a series of procedures, that is kind of between OCC and ODS, and that those are well understood, and we have built the capacity across both of the organisations to be as ready as we can be. But what we do anticipate will be increased demand
in this particular area. But we have done a lot of preparatory work, and we are already actually working to our Woops law in order to kind of be prepared for the launch next week.
Thank you, Nerys. James, do you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I just want to add really that these sets of policies really ensure that we follow the lessons learned approach from the tragedy of Arab, who passed away tragically, but also from the Grenfell tragedy as well, with the fire safety policy. I should also add, in terms of the asbestos policy, as members will know very well indeed, the vast majority of the housing stock is at least 60 years old. Some of it is 80 years old. So therefore, the majority of the housing stock will have asbestos. So therefore, this is a very robust policy to ensure the safety of residents is first and foremost the top priority. I think finally, in terms of the disrepair policy, I think it sets out that the standards for residents should be world class. And so therefore it states that there should be every possible initiative and steps taken to ensure that there never is a property in disrepair. But if such a scenario does occur, steps are followed. But frankly, the majority of the policy is to ensure that that situation never arises. I just also like to echo Councillor Smith's comments. I think the residents have worked incredibly hard, and frankly, they gave up their time on every 2 weeks on a Wednesday or Tuesday after evening when they did not need to do so. And I think it's to their great credit that the policies have the lived-in experience of the tenants, and I think in fact they were significantly changed, and it does show how policy should never be developed just by officers. They must be developed in partnership with the tenants.
Thank you. It's really welcome to hear that. I'm just going to check with Mark and Stuart to see whether there's anything they wanted to add at this stage. Mark, Stuart?
Good evening. I've got nothing to add at this stage. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Stuart. Mark?
Yes, also nothing from me. As James explained, the residents were very on hand to pull the policy to pieces, and it was a very good exercise.
Thank you very much. Great. Okay. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Yeah, it's a question. I think I know the answer, but I'm not sure. I mean, it's because as I'm reading through the documents, the wording changes slightly, and so I'm not entirely clear, but I just wanted to clarify this. So what we have is the 4 policies relate obviously to things which are properties. They're physical things that are wrong with, need addressing in a property. And at some points in the document, it refers to the HRA's responsibility as the owner and controller of those properties. At other times, it refers to the need to respond to the requirements and the needs of tenants. So it's veered off the property and it's veered onto a property which has a tenant in it. So that could, for example, not include a property which is currently empty. And I can think of quite a few in my ward, and I'm sure many of us can, of properties which have got exactly these problems, and those have not been addressed. There is then a second related question, which is around areas which are shared areas, so hallways, stairwells, those kinds of things. One of the policies very specific, the asbestos policy, that those are relevant. I have, again, I'll use a ward example. An example in my ward, which is a block of apartments, 6 apartments. There is asbestos paint, very traditional 1980s paint with asbestos in it. It's on the ceiling. I'd be interested in, and I will be asking, whether we're adhering to this and actually have a written record of it, because I'm not convinced we do based on the responses I've had, but I see the policy, I understand it. But there are other elements of this. So the repair, for example, there is disrepair there in damaged windows. I'm not convinced that the disrepair covers communal areas in quite the same way. The wording isn't quite similar. And then the final thing, and I'll use that example again, is a mixture of council properties and properties which are privately owned, as is inevitable. Lots of accommodation is like that. And it is unclear in this whether we're only referring to properties being used by tenants who are HRA tenants, or is it properties, so shared spaces, which are shared by people who are private owners or by people who are tenants of private owners, of which there are many. And so I just want to be clear, are you talking about everything that the HRA owns? Are you talking about the shared spaces having exactly the same the four policies applying exactly the same way to shared areas? Because that's not clear. And what about people whose access to those shared areas is because they are not tenants, but private owners or private renters of a privately owned property? Yeah, I hope that's helpful in explaining the question. And as I said, I think it's doing that, but the wording varies from each one and it's not clear.
Well, I thank you for those questions, Councillor. I can confirm that all the policies do cover voids or empty properties, absolutely. So, and they do cover communal areas, and all of them definitely cover that. And I'm happy to put that on the record. In terms of disrepair, the disrepair policy, yeah, I have a colleague online, but yes, I can confirm it does cover communal areas. In terms of the current situation, in terms of the asbestos paints that you refer to, I don't have that technical information with me, but what I will do, I will take that away and come back to you, Councillor, in the very near future.
It's fine, that's a piece of casework which disappeared into an electronic ether and may or may not reappear, but that's not your fault.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and helpful to have that reassurance. Has anyone got any additional questions or comments? No? Okay, in which case, can we thank you all very much for the work? And I think we should also put on the record our thanks to the tenants who participated. We're very, very grateful to them. As you said, they didn't have to do that, but it's obviously made the policies much better as a result of their work. So thank you to all the officers who supported and wrote the policies, but thank you to them too. So can we approve the 4 policies? Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Right, we are now therefore on to item 13 on the agenda, which is review of the additional HMO licensing scheme. And back over to you, Linda, and I believe we have Courtney here as well. So thank you.
Yes, we do. I'd like to introduce you to Courtney Bennett, who is Head of Regulatory Services, or Regulatory Services Manager, I think. This is Courtney's first Cabinet meeting. So yeah, I'm sure we'll make her feel very welcome. I'll start off by saying, I'm sure you've heard me say before that, we should be really proud of the fact that we're the only local authority in the country where every privately let home needs a licence. And that is thanks to a triumvirate of licensing schemes that we have in place, only one of which is mandatory, and that's for larger HMOs. We've then got our selective licensing scheme, which we've had for a few years now, and a scheme for smaller HMOs, which we've had for what will be 15 years when it comes up for renewal next year. But we need to take steps to renew it. And that's what this report is about this evening. So asking for approval to go out to consultation so that a report can come back to us with the consultation results to hopefully recommend a renewal of that scheme, because this scheme, like the other licensing schemes we've got in place, are really delivering and driving up the standard of private rented homes in the city. And it's an area of work that I hope we'll be able to continue. And with that, over to you, Courtney.
Great, thank you, Councillor. just kind of a few extra kind of pieces of information. As the councillor said, right, we're not making a decision here. We're just looking to go out to do a consultation to allow us to test the evidence base and listen to views from our stakeholders before bringing a final proposal back to cabinet next year. The scheme has driven improvements, but there's still some persistent issues, particularly around fire safety, overcrowding, property condition. So this engagement's important. The actual consultation will run from November to mid-January. It will include an online survey as well as some direct engagement with our key stakeholders, those stakeholders being landlords and agents, universities and student groups, tenant organizations, residents groups, statutory partners such as Fire and Rescue Service. We will be holding an in-person, we have a landlord forum every year, November 25th, and that's usually well attended, and we plan to do a consultation session in that. And then, yeah, so the outcome will be, the outcome of the consultation will be back in spring to recommend on whether to designate a renewed scheme for a further 5 years.
Alex, and then I have a question myself.
Right, thoroughly support this. It's been a fantastic policy which has delivered a much better stock of HMOs across this city. My question, and feel free to choose who answers, or you maybe both. I would be interested to know if you had any sense of how many properties which would previously have been considered as HMOs have now switched to short-term let as a way of avoiding this licensing scheme.
I don't have any specific data on, on that regard. I will say when it comes to short let, that's a priority for planning enforcement is actually also under my purview, and that is a priority for our planning enforcement team. And we've been having a lot of success thus far. Just last month, we issued kind of 26 notices, and we're moving on that. I believe we had in September a successful case where we were able to take 7 short lets and take them back to the private rented sector. I'm happy to take that away and get you kind of more detailed data on that, if that would be helpful.
Thank you, it would be very helpful. I suppose my follow-up question maybe to Councillor Smith is, would it not be helpful for the government to make this a lot easier for our officers, that they don't have to pursue a few every month, which is incredibly hard work, but that we had a proper national policy which would allow us to set a limit on the number of short-term let properties?
Yes, and we'll continue to make the case for that and argue for that and keep the pressure on for that whenever we have the opportunity.
A point I didn't hesitate to make to the Housing Minister when I saw him last week. So, yeah. But no, thank you very much for that. My question was really about when we first put this scheme in place, we had to essentially prove that the state of private rented properties in the city was not good. Obviously, part of the point of the scheme is to improve them, and we have had some success in that. Obviously, as you quite rightly set out in the paper, there's always new problems, and there's also always, still work to be done. But I mean, you could foresee a time, could you not, where we have actually made significant differences, and therefore, if the criteria for getting the scheme is always the same, that you can only do it if you've got terrible property, that you're sort of victims of your own success, and therefore you lose the licensing, and I would suggest if we do that things will go backwards. So am I right in my understanding of the criteria, and is it a bit difficult for us at this particular point in time to be making that case, therefore? Because we have to simultaneously be saying having a licensing scheme does make a difference, but it hasn't yet made enough of a difference, so we still need it.
Yeah, I think, if you kind of look at the last 5 years and then look at our current scheme, there have been some improvements, but we're still seeing some persistent kind of issues. If you look at, we have about 3,000 HMO licenses. That's only about 20% of our total kind of stock, but that still represents disproportionate 35% of our kind of complaints that we get. Also, you know, we still get complaints about non-licensed properties. I think we've received over 800 in the kind of this scheme. But then some positives, right? Like you said, we also see consistent kind of renewal of the folks who do have a license, which kind of really shows, I think, acceptance of the scheme and so forth. So there have been improvements, and yeah, like, right, if we do get to the point, if we do our job well, I suppose we kind of not work ourselves out of a job, but work ourselves out of needing it. But I think there's definitely still a case to be made that it provides value for Oxford.
I'm certainly convinced of that, but yeah, it's just making that case to government. Yeah, Ed.
I'll be really brief. I know it's late. I mean, I remember the introduction of this scheme, and we had to do a lot of intensive lobbying at the time at national level to bring it about. And the thing which I really appreciate, and it links to this last conversation, is about the proactive nature of the enforcement. I mean, the truth is, there are lots of people in Oxford who are really desperate for somewhere to live because it's really, really tough to find somewhere. But unfortunately, if you don't then regulate things properly and proactively, then people are ripe for being ripped off because people are just so desperate for that. You know, and the truth is, particularly people that are less confident, of lower means financially, are much more likely to not want to complain. And so that's why the proactive nature of this is really important. It's important for keeping people safe. And I confidently predict, Susan, I completely agree with what you said and what Courtney said as well, but I confidently predict as long as our housing market is broken in the way that it is in Oxford, there will still be the potential for exploitation in this sector. And that's why we really need to keep this proactive scheme going.
Well, here, frankly. Yeah, and we thank you very much for the work you're doing, both on this and indeed on short-term lets. So thank you. Any further questions or comments? I'm not seeing any. I think your button's still on, Ed. So thank you. Can we move to the recommendations then, which are to agree to proceed with the statutory 10-week consultation on the basis it's necessary to renew it in its entirety for a further 5 years. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Courtney. Right, we are now on to agenda item 14, which is the local nature recovery strategy, and over to Anna Railton, and we're joined by James online. So, over to you.
Lovely, thank you very much. So a bit of historical context on why this document, which is covered in Oxfordshire County Council branding, is in front of this meeting today. So the Environment Act of 2021 mandated that all upper tier local authorities here at the County Council produce a local nature recovery strategy to support environmental and biodiversity goals. Oxfordshire County Council, along with stakeholders such as Natural England, have worked together over the last year or so to produce this strategy in front of us this evening. It's also involved officers from the City Council's environmental quality and planning policy teams as well. It's already been endorsed by the county and the other districts in Oxfordshire, and the draft LNRS has received over sort of 2,000 consultation responses, with approximately 3/4 in support, demonstrating a sort of strong public backing for the strategy and what it contains. The core objective of this strategy is to guide the creation and enhancements of habitats in locations where they can deliver the most significant benefits for biodiversity in the wider environment. You know, i.e., where in Oxfordshire can we get the sort of best bang for buck for biodiversity? This is proposed to be done via reconnecting fragmented habitats to make a cohesive network that gives the best chance of supporting the local wildlife population. Importantly, the LNRS is a non-binding strategy, so landowners and managers, including this council, are not required to implement the proposed measures, but are encouraged to do so as funding and partnership opportunities arise. This strategy is designed to complement existing land use and development policies rather than restrict them. It sits within a wider, sort of broader policy framework that balances environmental protection with sustainable development. So local authorities, including this one as a planning authority, are legally required to consider rather than compelled to use the LNRS when preparing or updating local plans, helping to guide important development decisions in a way that supports the natural environment. However, it does not preclude or restrict development. So, this is a well-written, well-consulted and well-thought-through piece of work. So I enthusiastically recommend that Cabinet gets its approval for the County Council to publish this strategy. I'd also like to thank all of the officers across our planning, policy and environmental quality departments for their work over many months on this document.
Thanks very much, Anna. James, did you want to add anything?
Thank you. No, I think most of it has been covered there. I think it's just to stress that it's very much about opportunities, the strategy. A lot of Oxfordshire is covered, and 37% of the city is covered one way or another in the mapping. So it's about the opportunities that are there rather than, as Councillor Elter said, restricting or precluding anything else, really.
Thank you. Can I just clarify something with you, James? In the recommendation to Cabinet, it kind of seems to end mid-sentence. So do we just ignore the word by? Is that, or actually what we're doing, agreeing to give approval to the County Council to publish it, full stop? Or is the by a particular date or by a particular individual or what?
I think just to prove it covers it, just the context, the deadline in which we have to object is today. But just to add into this, the only reason we can object is if we consider that it hasn't been properly consulted or if it's lacking, which we don't. But we thought it was prudent to bring something of a strategic level to Cabinet for awareness and endorsement. So I think it can very much omit the by and just approve.
Yeah. Okay, I thought that was where I was heading. So I think we'll just remove that word from the recommendation. Has anyone got any questions or comments on the document? No. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, James. Can I move us to the recommendation removing the word by? Everyone happy to approve it? Thank you very much. Right, the end is getting in sight. Domestic abuse policy for council staff. So we are over to, is it Nigel or Lubna?
Me.
Lubna. So Lubna, and I think we have Liz online. So Lubna first.
Thank you very much, Chair. The domestic abuse policy for staff sets out the council's commitment to support employee health and well-being at work, which includes those affected by domestic abuse. The policy outlines the roles and the responsibility for council staff to create a safe space for disclosure, support and safety. They look at how concerns can be raised and reported so appropriate support can be provided for staff affected by domestic abuse. How perpetrators who are employees can be held accountable for their actions and be offered support to change their behaviour. We also look through the policy development. So the policy has been developed with input from the survivors of domestic abuse champions, Unionson and the People's Team. And I'll request if you have any questions, let us know.
Thank you very much, Lubna. Liz, did you want to add anything?
No, I don't. Oh, well, actually, I do. I just want to say it complements the domestic abuse policy for service users as well.
Yeah, thank you. Questions and comments? Ed.
Yeah, this is probably more one for Liz than Lubna, but the policy talks a bit about the role of the champions. Obviously, that's contingent on the champions being recruited and trained. How does that feel at the moment in terms of the sort of number and the spread across service areas?
We have about 24 champions across Oxford City Council, mainly in frontline teams that work with customers. So the training is a 2 full-day training, and we have them in all the housing teams and in the community safety teams and in some of the community teams as well. So some people obviously leave, change jobs, but the others then go on and do the course. So when somebody actually feels that they would like to do that, it's a free course they can go on, and it's a role within the City Council. So they need their managerial approval for it.
That's really impressive, actually, 24 across the organisation and that depth of training. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I really welcome this. I think it's really important, and these are really tricky issues, particularly in an employment situation. So I think it's fantastic that we've got that many people trained to help and to be responsive when they're needed. So, and hopefully to be able to signpost people to services as well. So thank you very much for that. Lubna.
I'd just like to add to that point. The domestic abuse champions also have access to contact details of the champions and other agencies across Oxfordshire. And the domestic abuse champions can also attend these workshops, conferences and niche training to improve their knowledge and skills. Liz, Dawn and Christine and the Sanctuary Scheme Coordinator are the lead DA champions within the City Council. If Liz commissions specialist training for the council staff, she then invites the DA champions when relevant. For example, they receive training from PAWS, working with women who have had multiple children removed, and the DA champions are invited to attend.
Thank you, Lubna. Right, any other questions or comments? No. Well, can we move to the recommendations then, which are to approve the domestic abuse policy for staff and to delegate authority to the domestic abuse lead to make minor changes as required in line with legislation, guidance, etc. Happy to support. Thank you very much. Unanimous support. Thank you very much for your work, Liz. We truly appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
We are now on to item 16, which is the project approval and delegations for Westlands Drive and Halliday Hill Affordable Housing Scheme. Over to you, Linda, and we have Dave here as well. Thank you.
Oxford needs homes, so let's vote tonight to build another 15 of them, 15 affordable homes. I think it's very uncontroversial. This scheme already has planning permission. The land is already owned by the HRA. It was called into scrutiny, but they didn't have any recommendations to make about it. So I hope we can approve the scheme this evening. And if so, then hopefully we'll be able to start on site in April next year, and possibly even have people moving in a year later. So, yep, what's not to like?
Right, Dave, anything to add?
No, that's very ably put. Thank you very much. Nothing to add. Just any questions?
Thank you. Any questions, Nigel?
It's more a comment really, which is I'm really glad this is here with us for approval tonight. It's been a long time coming since planning approval was given, but we've got there. It's an important development. It's frankly a much better use of space than the way the space is being used at the moment. And the second thing I would say that I'm very pleased to see reference in the paper to improving the rest of the green square that is left behind, which is pretty unappetizing and not particularly friendly at the moment. And so if we can do that as part of this and make it somewhere where people might actually use and sit down and enjoy, that would be a good corollary or a good side benefit, as well as the 15 new affordable homes. So thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
Whoopee.
Right, can we move to recommendations then, which are to grant project approval, delegate authority to the Director of Housing, and grant approval for environment of relevant budget. Everyone happy to approve those recommendations? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. And you will be, everyone will be relieved to hear this is the final item on the agenda. So thank you, Ted. I'm so sorry, someone had to be last. So Councillor Turner, over to you, and then to Ted.
Thanks. Well, channeling my inner Linda, Oxford needs accurate real estate valuations for accounting purposes, because otherwise bad things would happen. And we do not have the expertise to provide us in-house, so we will go out and procure such quality services as are necessary at the most expeditious rate. And Ted can fill in any details people might have about the process or the need.
Goodness, right. Thank you for that introduction, Ted. Ted, over to you.
Thank you. I mean, I don't think I have anything further to add, really. Hopefully this is quite a straightforward one for this evening to end on.
Thank you. Alex.
Well, this is the meaty item. We've been waiting all evening for this, not least because it's the only one I've ever seen which says key decision, yes, see link. I've never had to look at a link before for a key decision. I looked. I feel suitably informed by what I saw. So there we are. Now, my question was, and I should say, Ted's just sent me an email I've been waiting for 8 years, and he's now my favourite council officer. So thank you very much for that.
Wow, thank you.
The question I had was just coming back to the item 9 in the town hall, and just asking whether the valuations would include things like that which are difficult to value. How do we handle things like that where we've got specific uses, we've got buildings which are listed in a particular way? Is that going to be inside or outside this programme?
It's included inside this programme, so they'll value all our property assets. Obviously, by outsourcing it to an external consultant, they have a much wider range of experienced valuers than we would be able to secure if we did it in-house.
Thank you very much, Ted. Okay, any other questions or comments? I thought you were going to ask for there, Caroline, but she's waving goodbye. In which case, can we move to the recommendations, which are to give project approval to approve the procurement and delegate authority to Deputy Chief Executive of Place to move ahead with this project. So thank you very much, everybody. That has been approved unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody, for bearing with us this evening. I'm sorry it took a bit longer than usual. It was quite a meaty agenda, as you will see. So thank you very much.